Sex is permeating our culture. It's everywhere. It's pervasive from elementary school to the high levels of government, and it's increasingly so. So we're not addressing it. And I think it's about time to ask ourselves, what is this thing called sex? I was trained as an endocrinologist or hormone doctor and a clinical pharmacologist. Over the years, I was involved in fertility studies in both females and males. One of the first to use drugs that increase ovulation in infertile women. And over the years, I've counseled many people, men and women, with respect to sexual problems. And I am very much concerned now what's going on in our country with respect to the sexual revolution. What's going on in the brain that makes sex so attractive to so many people? I came up with the idea that there's a law, which I call the brain genital law, or the BGL, which, let me define it for you. I'm going to read it for you. Basically, it says, in order to ensure the evolutionary objective, which is to propagate the race, we have to propagate the race. The brain contains countless ways to create and stimulate both sexual arousal and sexual performance in order to achieve what? To achieve orgasm, primarily by heterosexual copulation, man and woman making love. Now, in the process of evolution, the brain is loaded with all kinds of ways to stimulate sex, and some of them are not necessarily related to copulation between a man and a woman. Let me read you about certain types of sexual arousal and sexual expression or performance. Let's go to sexual arousal. Mental, the mind. Fantasies. Fantasies is where everything is. Fantasies stimulate everything. We all have our fantasies. Even I, at age 79, have some fantasies once in a while. We have seduction. We have domination. We have sadism. We're all thinking about these things. Masochism, ménage à trois, polyamorous, bisexual, homosexual, dreams with fantasies, violence stimulating the mind. As far as the physical body is concerned, body appearance and body language. Someone walks in the room, it's the way they look and how they comport themselves. The erogenous zones, the zones of sexual sensitivity in the body, the penis, the clitoris, the breasts, the lips, the tongues, the anus, the ears, the nose, etc., etc. There are other physical stimulations, such as odor. Napoleon, we have forgotten that odor is a big stimulant of sex historically. Napoleon, when he won a battle, for example, and he was married to Josephine, some of you know that, he would send a rider back to Paris, speedily riding his horse to tell Josephine, I'm coming home, do not bathe. That's how prevalent the power of odor was in the old days, before the cosmetic industry took over and substituted body odor for perfume odor and other odors. Now let's look at the various types of actual sexual expressions or performance. And by the way, while these are going on, usually the fantasies persist. So you have the mental combined with the physical. Powerful, powerful combination. And here's the list. Heterosexual copulation, which is what the brain genital law, or the BGL, is all about. Masturbation, pain, whipping and spanking, seduction, submission, physical and verbal, dominatrix and female submissive, ménage à trois, polyamorous, voice sound and choice of words. If a man and a woman walks in, they can say the same thing, using the same words, but the way they say it can stimulate you. voyeurism, rape, prostitution, homosexuality, transgenderism, bestiality or bestiality, making love to animals, which, by the way, is not that uncommon, tickling and clapping, among other things. We have all these idiosyncratic ways that the BGL stimulates the sexual expression and arousal. For example, clapping can really arouse certain men and women. Snuff movies or violence. Many people do not know what a snuff movie is. That's when someone watches someone being killed and has an orgasm over that. Usually it's in a movie, usually it's fake, but in history, and probably it's going on in certain parts of the world, women are paid large sums of money to succumb to a snuff movie because they need the money to support the family, etc. Not very good. But that's in the brain. That's what I'm trying to say. The brain contains all kinds of things that are not pleasant with respect to sex. Also, scientific and medical studies support the brain genital law, or the BGL. For example, there are 100 trillion synapses in the brain. A synapse is a thing that connects brain cells to communicate with each other. 100 trillion. When this brain is exposed in brain imaging studies, exposed to sexual stimulation, be it videos or something to read about sex, a variety of parts of the brain light up, which demonstrate that the brain, the BGL, is pervasive throughout the brain. Also, in patients with spinal cord injury, be they men or be they women, they can have up to 100 orgasms a day, which is not good news, for it tells us that we have that capacity, and that if someone can come up with some type of drug to stimulate 100 orgasms a day, that's not good news, as we shall see. Now, what is the obvious conclusion? And some of you are not going to like this, but those things that I spoke about regarding sexual arousal, sexual expression and performance, masochism, sadism, all of them are natural. All sex is natural. And we must accept this fact before we go forward with our sexual revolution and destabilize our country. More about this later. You know, it's interesting in our rapidly changing times that we happen to forget certain very important facts about sex and about the history of sex. It has always been regulated. All societies of all time have regulated the expression of the BGL, or the brain genital law. What has been forgotten, and we're turning to science for answers. Science has very few answers with respect to human behavior and sex. We have forgotten that the greatest experiment of all time, the greatest laboratory experiment of all time, is the history of all nations and all cultures since recorded history. And what has happened? They have dampened, put the clamps on the expression of sex. As we shall see later, we are deregulating that. If you deregulate that, then things will happen that have never happened before. All our societies, all our cultures of all time somehow knew this. They did not have scientific evidence. They had experience, which is much important with respect to human behavior. And what did they do? In practically all these cultures, they limited sexual expressions by heterosexual copulation, marriage, babies, to promote evolution, to promote the race. It makes a hell of a lot of sense because history proves it. Social experience is science. it is more important than 2 plus 2 equals 4, or Einstein's theory of relativity. Science cannot tell you why we feel what we feel, why we love, why we hate, what altruism is, why we fall in love. But people can recognize that. So my feeling is that by clamping it down, in addition to propagating the race, all societies knew if you have permitted freedom of expression of sexual desire, there would be chaos. Imagine our country without any laws to suppress sexual expression, from pedophilia to rape to whatever. You have to clamp it down. The brain genital law, unregulated, is a catastrophe. Let me just read from the Bible, from Deuteronomy. And I love Deuteronomy. Some admonitions and prohibitions on behavior in general and on sexual behavior. Cursed is the man who dishonors his father or mother. Cursed is the man who withholds justice from the alien, the fatherless, or the widow. Now, with respect to sex, cursed is the man who has sexual relationships with any animal. Cursed is the man who sleeps with his sister, the daughter of his father, or the daughter of his mother. Cursed is the man, get this one, who sleeps with his mother-in-law, and so on and so forth. But also in Deuteronomy, which is very interesting, I'll read this to you. If two men are fighting, and the wife of one of them comes to rescue her husband from his assailant, and she reaches out and seizes him by his private parts or his genitals, you shall cut off her hand. Show her no mercy. Could you believe that? Now, in the Hammurabi Code in the Middle East, here's another one, which is very interesting, which puzzles me, why, about the connection. If a man kisses a married woman, it's considered adultery, and also his hand is cut off. So you see, throughout history, there are all kinds of regulations regarding behavior in general and sexual behavior. In every walk of life, in order to make a diagnosis of a problem, you must have the facts. You have to start with the facts. Now, with respect to sex, here is one indisputable fact. Men are hornier than women, are more desirous of sex than women. There's little doubt about that. Just ask any woman. It's self-evident. Porno on the internet is watched by 80% of men, only 20% of women. Prostitution is mainly a female profession. Very few male prostitutes. Female homosexuals or lesbians have perhaps 4 or 5 maximum partners in life, while male homosexuals, the gay community, has about up to 100, 200, or 300, some say 1,000 partners in a lifetime. There's a story that a woman told me at the coffee shop the other day of a little boy in a bathtub. The mother was scrubbing the kid down, took him out of the bathtub, laid him on the floor, started wiping him off. She was wiping him off in the penis area. The kid said, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, what is this? Is this my brain?" And the mother, stunned, paused and thought a bit and said, "No, son, not yet. Now I'm going to say something that will be perceived as politically incorrect. Women intentionally turn men on. They know it. They love it. It's part of the character. It's not a negative criticism." The other day I was down in my coffee shop and trying to concentrate in my reading, but it was a busy day and lots of women came in. And I noticed 3 things. One, they're wearing leggings that are plastered onto their legs and their rear ends. I don't know how they do it. Number two, women with shorts and young gals with shorts. So short, that if they got any shorter, you would be entering the twilight zone. Number three, cleavages, where the breasts were virtually hanging out. Frequently with the woman wearing the leggings, the tight leggings. So I said to myself, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? And I, being a man at my age, could not concentrate on what I was reading. What is going on in our culture now, we must accept this, that women are creating increasingly numbers of sexual fantasies to men and to other women. Now, I'll leave this up to you, but who do you think is at fault? Adam or Eve? We have seen how historically that the BGL, or the brain genital law, has been regulated or controlled. But now in the United States, I think for the first time in history, in fact, I'm sure of it, we are the most sexually liberated country in written history. And the consequences are significant. And why is this so? Well, that's a very good question, why is this so? But two reasons. First one is technology, medical and scientific technology. We have oral contraceptives, we have antibiotics, we have abortifacients, we have everything that says one can have sex without having a child. Number two, we have a reduction or diminishing impact of Judeo-Christian values. You don't hear about the Ten Commandments anymore. And so these combined, technology and the reduction of moral values and religious values, they ping pong, one plays off the other, has led to the liberation of the BGL, or the brain genital law, where sex is rampant. Let's take a few examples, for the big one being, in my opinion, the internet, which is the great promoter now of sexual fantasies, 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. One need not leave one's home, but go to the computer and get turned on. I think we're having an epidemic of masturbation in our country, and I don't know the significance of it. Number two, with the computer, you can go find a companion now, be it a nice dinner date or one for menage a trois or any kind of sexual relationship. The internet is the big driver of sexual fantasies and sexual action, and it is getting larger and more sophisticated and more effective. Let's now take a look at the military. Women are increasingly being integrated into all aspects of the military, including warfare. And I just want to show you a photo. Take a look at it. It says a lot, doesn't it? It says that there are problems in the military with women and men being together. We all know that. There have been sex scandals, but now they're keeping it quiet. But there's no doubt that the military is having significant problems with women and men integrated. Why did they do this? Most of the generals were against it, and they were correct. But this is happening now. And right now, no one is saying we made a mistake. We should correct this or do something about it. Not that women shouldn't be in the military, but not in the trenches with men, if you know what I mean. Also, I know some people I better be careful, I won't mention names, very high in the military, who tell me a few things. For example, on an aircraft carrier where there are men and women crowded together and things are happening. That's all I say. Things are happening that are chaotic. Again, we're keeping the lid on all of this chaos because we don't want this to leak out for political reasons. But it's not good for our national defense, is it? Now let's talk about the universities, because they really concern me. They are the major influence in our educational system and have led the way in integrating the sexes. They were the first ones to integrate the dormitories, to integrate the lavatories. And so we have men and women now living on the same floor, different floors in the same building, sharing the same lavatories. Now, if I were a young bull let's say a 19, 20-year-old young male in a dormitory with girls next door to me or around the corner. And one came in with her pajamas and with a glass of wine, and we had to maybe smoke something. What am I going to do? What did the university officials who promoted this policy, what were they thinking? When I thought about me being a young student with a woman in my room, I saw the Phantom of the Opera last week, and there was a famous song there. Past the point of no return, no turning back now. And that's exactly how I would feel, and it's exactly how she would feel. And the other thing about the universities, which is very interesting, there was a survey done in about 20 of them, top 20 universities in the United States, whether they were Democrats or Republicans on the faculties of the journalistic schools and the law schools. You couldn't find a Republican. There are a few here and there. It's dominated by Democrats teaching the students in law who become politicians, who become businessmen, who become lawyers, influential people in the community, and journalists, very influential people in our society. And they are liberal. Democrats are liberal. And I do not say this with any kind of judgment. And liberals are all for the deregulation of the brain genital law, or the BGL. They're all for sexual liberation. You can tell this impact by the media coverage of the Homosexual Marriage Act. 5-1 in favor of it. 5-1 in favor of it, with no logic behind it, that it was persuasive. In fact, there was no logic behind either argument, one way or the other, that was persuasive. So therefore, I believe that the universities, which are now facing chaos because of their policy, are in trouble, and they must do something about it. There's another phenomenon that is rarely spoken about, which I think is key. It's what I call increasing sexual options, increasing meeting people. The combination of increased sexual options and the combination of increased meeting people. When I grew up in the old neighborhood, we had, first of all, no radio. We had a radio, but no television, no telephone. My world was 2 blocks, 2 city blocks. Now, people go out to dinner, they go to Europe, they go away to college. You meet so many people every day, different people. And years ago, I said to my son, I said, there's always somebody better than you in this world. Before, when you met a woman or a woman met a man, you were almost forced to be together because your options were not great. But now our options are so broad that we can have more sex and we can meet more people, that there's always someone better than you out there. I hate to say it, even humble me. I know there's somebody better than I out there. So this is a huge problem. Without a solution. One principal reason, it leads to more sexual activity, more desire of sex. We are deregulated. We can go where we want, from the internet to meet people, to parties to meet people, to work to meet people. Attractive, biological chemistry. So this leads to a destabilizing effect on the family and relationship. If I fall in love one week with a woman, and let's say 3 months later, there's another one that comes down, who knows? I might be more attracted to that woman. And that is happening. That is happening. We all know that. Little written on it. So I think this is a huge problem, and don't know what to do about it. Technology has changed, or will change, the nature of evolution. Up to this point, evolution has been a natural phenomenon. Man makes love to woman, out comes baby, and it's a continuum. But now with our new technology, let's, for example, take in vitro fertilization, or IVF. Basically, it's getting sperm from a sperm sample and an egg from an ovary, and uniting them and implanting, making an embryo, then implanting them in a uterus, be it the mother's uterus or a rennet womb. And The way this is done should concern those who partake in this type of fertility treatment. For example, when in this male sperm ejaculate, there are millions and millions of sperm. I forget now, I think 7 to 10 million, but I don't remember exactly. And they race up the vagina, into the cervix, up the uterus, up the fallopian tube, a race. They're in competition to meet that solitary egg from the fallopian tube, okay? The best sperm, I'm making this judgment from an evolutionary point of view, the strongest and the best sperm wins and gets to the egg. Okay? When you do in vitro fertilization, you just pick one sperm out of the millions. We don't know if that sperm, in fact, it's highly probable that it's almost impossible that this be the right sperm. The right sperm being defined as the one that would normally get there first. Okay? Then you have the egg. We're not sure that's the right egg either. We're not sure that's the right egg, whether that would be fertilized in the fallopian tube. So we have these question marks. And then we have another thing, which it's a new era in genetics. We used to believe that everything was in the gene, that happened in the gene by mutations, etc. Now we have a field called epigenetics. Now we're finding out that the environment, be it in the body or outside the body, can change the function of DNA or genetic activity. Not the structure. The structure saying it's the same, but the function. It can swell a DNA, etc. We don't know how this happens. When you remove a sperm from an ejaculate or an egg from an ovary or whatever, you are changing the environment. When you freeze it, you are changing the environment. When you defreeze it, you are changing the environment. When you implant it, you are changing the environment. So what is happening now is we don't know what's going to happen in the future to these babies. We don't know. But my point is that we're getting away from copulation, natural evolution, to technical evolution, which will change the nature of mankind. And finally, I sometimes wonder why people are for more sex and against sex, or for abortion, against abortion. And there are many, many reasons. There are ethical and moral and religious reasons, which I respect and understand. But there's one thing that, and I think perhaps it's about time that we expose ourselves like Rousseau did. What do conservatives and liberals, this has occurred to me, what are their fantasies? Are they different? What are their sexual fantasies? Is one a conservative because he has one type of fantasy? Is a liberal conservative because he has another type of fantasy? I have my ideas. But I think we should, since sex is becoming so big, I think we should have the science of sex to say, do sexual fantasies affect behavior? Do liberals have one type of sexual fantasy? And do conservatives have another type? And those in between have, or maybe multiple types. We have to know this in order to understand sex more and its impact on our culture, because it is impacting as much as the economy, as much as the military, as much as our educational system. So I wonder about this, and then why not give it a try and think about this? But bottom line, we should know more about the sexual fantasies of our leaders in particular, because sex is impacting our culture enormously, causing chaos, and we have to find out what is going on. Now I'm going to address something that really worries me. And when I mention this to people, they usually smile. When I ask the question, what happens when an aphrodisiac is available in our country? They all smile. Wipe that smile off your face. because an aphrodisiac will be the ultimate destroyer of our culture. And I'll tell you why. I see it as the ultimate destructive force in our culture. More destructive than heroin, more destructive than drugs, more destructive than anything else. Put on your cap of imagination now. Number one, what happens if an aphrodisiac is available only to men? Two, what happens if an aphrodisiac is available only to women? Three, what happens if an aphrodisiac is available to both? If you think about it, it will permeate our entire culture from elementary school to the Defense Department. Imagine China discovering an aphrodisiac, keeping it a secret, and selling it over the counter in the black market in the United States. Imagine that. Imagine spies using the aphrodisiac for extortion and finding out information by turning on their partners. A national security threat. The family will dissolve. When you wake up in the morning with an aphrodisiac, you're usually, for example, when you usually wake up, you have what is known as self-consciousness. You are aware of yourself. Right now, you are aware of yourself listening to me. I am aware of myself speaking to you. Okay. But if I wake up in the morning, be a man or a woman wakes up in the morning, and in that cabinet is an aphrodisiac, are you going to take it or not? Will it become addictive or not? You become genital conscious instead of self-conscious. Highly destructive force. You will think only of sex. In fact, let me read you something. After World War I, in Dusseldorf, Germany, the American forces obtained a copy of the Communist Rules for Revolution, Communist Russia, for revolution. A, number one, corrupt the young, get them away from religion, get them interested in sex. And the aphrodisiac will do that, not only to the young, to everyone. Family will disappear. Extortion will reign supreme. Highly destabilizing. We must have a national policy far, far more stringent than on heroin, marijuana, cocaine, synthetic cannabinoids, and whatever. We have seen that the freeing up of sexual expression will lead to chaos. It's leading to chaos now. It is undeniable. We must accept reality. But then you have to ask yourself, is this good or bad? Are we in a phase where we are going to another level? For example, the family is disappearing, and perhaps will be replaced by other institutions. We don't know what they are. Maybe a Plato type of institution where the state takes over. Aristotle emphasized the basic unit of society is the family. So we have something going on. We're in flux. And where's it taking us? And is it good for our country as well as for the people within it? And I think the first question we have to ask, which is rarely asked, by the way, in our universities, is what's the purpose of a nation? What is the purpose of the United States? What is its major goal? Have you ever thought of that? Well, let me give you my answer. It's to survive. And how do you survive? By being strong and stable. Then you ask yourself, is the sexual revolution, the deregulation of the BGL, making us stronger or weaker, stable, more stable or less stable? And I think the evidence points to the fact that there's a chaos leads to instability. So I'm very, very much concerned, and I think you should be. So the question that our country must address right now, we have to find our leaders. Our leaders are afraid to talk about sex. Imagine a leader comes, this is my sexual fantasy. They're afraid to talk about it. But it's time. It's time we have op-ed articles, we have editorials and television shows, more detail about sex, in more detail. So the question is, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? And I'll end our conversation by saying that this issue must be addressed. To repeat, I fear with the oncoming of the aphrodisiac, this may be one of the most destabilizing forces in our country, more so than the illicit drug epidemic.